Ladies and gentlemen, anytime we get to watch Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura throw down in high-stakes chess is a good time. And today we're going to watch exactly that. This is the first event in the two qualifying events for the 2025 Esports World Cup Chess Edition. The winner of today's match secures a finalist spot for July, August in Riyadh. In the final, it's Magnus Carlsen versus Hikaru Nakamura. What more can you ask for? It's a best of four. First 1 to 2.5 wins. If it's 2 to 2, we play tie breaks. We play a playoff. So that is very, very exciting stuff. Friendly reminder, as always, at the beginning of these videos, I just let you know, I am going on tour in May in Europe. I'll be in Brussels, London, Vienna, Munich, Berlin, and Warsaw, Poland. A lot of special guests will be on stage with me, like Anna Kramling, Danny Wrench, hopefully Vincent Keimer, and many more. If you want, tickets are in the description, and they're going fast, especially those VIP tickets. So I'm really looking forward to this tour. It's going to be so much fun. Live guests, the ELO, interviews, exhibition games, blindfold games, blitz games, etc. It's going to be great. You know what else is going to be great? The Esports World Cup. So we kick things off with Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces. All right, this is the finals of the first qualification event here in 2025. Magnus is playing with white, and it's 10-minute with no bonus time. Magnus opens with e4. Hikaru plays e5. It's the first game. You want to settle in a little bit. It's not yet time for a French or Caro-Kann or Sicilian or something that inherently will lead to a little bit more risk and imbalance. And we have an Italian on the board. Bishop c4. Knight f6. Provoking, obviously, white into playing knight g5, which some of you watching this might like and know the fried liver. At the high level, the fried liver is not played that often. We have d3. And now Hikaru plays this move he's been playing throughout the tournament. He plays h6. Hikaru is a very principled guy. Like, if you're just watching this YouTube video right now in a vacuum, meaning you just watched it because you liked the title or the, thumbnail or whatever, then you should know, and I will give you some additional context, that Hikaru has been playing this move, pawn to h6, a lot in this qualification tournament. Generally, black is just developing the bishop, but he's stopping white from ever, doing anything over there and provoking white into playing something else. Now, Magnus just castles. Now Hikaru goes bishop c5 and plays like this. And I mean, basically, the only question is, will black play aggressively with a move like pawn to g5? This is sometimes what black goes for. And other times, black just castles. And basically just says, look, you can't ever put anything on the g5 square, and in the long run, this is the move that I've chosen. Now, it's kind of hard to simplify the Italian down for any beginner and intermediate players watching, but there are many plans for both sides in the Italian. Sometimes white expands over here. Sometimes black allows it. Sometimes black fights back and disallows it. Sometimes, you trade the light squared bishop. Other times white tries to venture over here. Other times white tries to prepare here. You can't do all of them, but you have to choose and stick with one. So we have h3. Here comes a5. So Hikaru plays a5, stopping white from, in the future, playing the move b4. Magnus plays a4 himself, not letting Hikaru gain any more space, securing any light squared control, and disallowing black from ever hopping in with a horse. Hikaru trades the light squared bishop. All of this has been seen before. Now we see this move b3 from Magnus. Basically saying, look, Hikaru, you can take me. And then what I would do is I would take with the b pawn to then build up, for a more central play in the future. And I have an active rook on the b file. So b3. Rook e8. Now, the moment that happens, Magnus goes pin. Bishop b5. We are no longer going to trade the pieces. I'm going to potentially take this knight and gain more space. I'm also going to potentially just put pressure on your position with a move like d4. And on top of that, I'm going to put my knight on c4, right? That's kind of the other idea. Hikaru backs the bishop up to the d7 square, just getting it out of the way. Magnus plays knight c4. Knight c4 is a good move. That move actually is quite a substantial positional threat. The threat being that you want to take this bishop and damage the pawn structure for black. At an amateur level, there is nothing being lost here, like nobody's blundering a queen, so it can be a little bit hard as a newer player, or even an experienced player, to understand like what's even significant about this, but black really should move the bishop so the bishop is not taken. Now Magnus plays bishop d2, which has many ideas. Some of them might include, first of all, sacrifices, just in the long term. Obviously, he's also looking over here to advance. Another possibility in this position is something with with a rook b1 and a b4, or just in general, just developing. Bishop a7. Hikaru provokes Magnus, and he is provoking Magnus into the following sequence. Bishop takes knight, bishop takes knight, rather bishop takes bishop, knight takes a5. Now that is a very straightforward tactic. You took the knight and then you took a pawn, and it looks like white is just much better. Well, white's not much better, because that pawn was tactically protected. How was it tactically protected? Always look for checks. Rook takes knight, which is what Hikaru goes for. Bishop takes f2, rook takes a5. However, Magnus saw all of this. All right, none of this came as a surprise to him. He basically just was like, I'm not too worried about my king being over here. I actually think that I now have a pawn majority, so watch this. b4. b5. c4. He backs the king up, but on the very next move, a5. So Magnus goes for this sequence where he's like, okay, I'm going to take the knight and then take the pawn. Hikaru's going to take the pawn, and then I'm going to take the bishop, and then he's going to go here regaining his pawn that I took. But I'm going to win a queenside pawn, which is going to allow me to play c4 with the discovered attack on the rook, which will have to back up, and then b4 to play b5, which will kick out this bishop, and then a5 will be joined by the bishop and my rook protecting. Okay, cool. That's what he goes for. Like, that is, Magnus went for this entire sequence. Notice another thing here. There's a hidden thing about this position for white. White has 7 pawns on the light squares and a dark squared bishop. The pawns counteract the effectiveness of the black bishop, and this bishop is very powerful because it's going to stand very nicely on the dark squares. So king g1, bishop to e6, pawn to a5. White is slightly better. I mean, it's nothing to write home about, but white is slightly better. The knight jumps back to potentially fight back and plant on c5 and target the pawn on d3. We have king h1, pawn takes b5, pawn takes b5. Now, if Magnus is going to win this game, it's going to be because of these pawns. Like, ultimately what will happen is one of these pawns is going to walk through, and it might not become a queen, but it will be a permanent problem in the black position. It's a stage 4, stage 5 pawn. Like, it's a problem. All right? And there's going to be no easy way to get rid of it. So, knight c5. Now a very nice move, rook a3, defending anything on the b3 and d3 squares. Queen b1, very nice piece coordination. In case it's not obvious, it's very clear. White is trying to advance on the left side of the board, which he does, on the queen side. Now, computer's not loving the move a6. It thought that, white should stay a little bit more patient, queen up, and then maybe even bring the rook. But we kind of see why that happens. And now the pawn makes it all the way to a7. This is not a particularly easy position to play with black. It's really not. You would think the pawn is just going to collapse, right? Like rook takes. No, not easy. Here, what Hikaru had to do is play bishop a4. He had to put his bishop in front of white's rook, protected by the knight. And then if white tries to target it, like let's say, bishop to e3, black has to play rook takes a7, winning the pawn. And you just actually survive here. Like the bishop just stays there. So bishop a4 would have been the solution probably, but it's still not simple at all. Hikaru goes like this, and now he somehow doesn't have an easy way to block the position, and Magnus is just going to start getting rid of the blockade. So Hikaru grabs the pawn on d3, but the position is already looking quite tough. Rook b1, and even though Magnus is down a pawn, the entire white setup is investing in the pawn on a7. Like everybody over here, rotating over. Hikaru lashes out with d5, then he lashes out with f5, but he's down to 40 seconds versus 4 minutes. It's just not enough. Not against Magnus, who grabs the bishop. Hikaru goes for a little bit of counterplay, but Magnus clean, picking up some material, and Hikaru throws in the towel here because if he just, okay, first of all, he has 12 seconds, so Magnus can basically do anything and win on time. but also the pawns are just too strong. And in the long run, you know, you will remove the defense. Black just cannot defend. So that was a very, very instructive game. I mean, it was an Italian, which ultimately was decided by this pawn wave, right? Like, he just advanced on that side of the board. I mean, in fact, Magnus's game was almost easy. Like, it was almost an easy game. Now, okay, he wins, which means Hikaru now not only has to win 2 games, he has to also make a draw. He has to win 2.5 out of 3 to force a playoff, all right? He gets the white pieces in the next game. He goes B3, all right? Playing his typical Nimso Larsen, puts the bishop on B2, puts the knight on F3. Hikaru likes to play like this because there's not a huge amount of opening theory here. You kind of always get a game because it's sort of up to black to take a setup. Magnus chooses a very, very principled setup. The setup with G6, D5, C5, it's a very, very nice setup. Now, Hikaru here plays like this. He gives this check. Then he grabs the knight. He does that to damage black's pawn structure, right? To make the pawns doubled and to leave this pawn isolated. Then he does this, and then he plays D4 and castles. Now, this is a very, you know, obviously a lot of pieces have been traded here, but it's still a position that is very, very full of life and leads to some interesting play. Magnus plays bishop E7. And in case it's already not clear, he's actually not even playing, according to the computer, in the best way. Long castles is a move, but that's not, you know, that's not a very human move. I think it's much more normal here to, like, take on D4. I think that move makes some sense as well. Bishop E7 is apparently a bad approach because white immediately hops in and starts putting pressure on this pawn. And actually, Hikaru gets a really, really pleasant position. This is, again, when you look at this, the first thing that should stick out to you here, first thing, like, you look at this position, well, first thing you should say is material is equal. Now, next thing, this is an isolated pawn. It's got no neighbors. So in a dream scenario, you would trade a lot of pieces here if you're playing with white. So in a moment, you're going to see, like, Hikaru's trading the knights. And then what he would love to do is he would love to, like, put every piece like this. All right. So this, and this would be fantastic for white, right? White would just maximize the pressure on this pawn. Now, Magnus is obviously not going to let him do that. He's going to try to get rid of the knight, and he's also going to try to defend, and he's also going to try to create counterplay. So at this point, it's a position where Hikaru is putting some pressure, right? He's got some pressure on Magnus. But how is he going to capitalize? Rook D1, rook, Queen C7. All right. Some, you know, just taking a little bit of space, improving the position gently. At some point, you're going to have to do something. And this really does feel like Magnus is just kind of like waiting. You know, he's just like, well, Hikaru, what are you going to do? You know, what are you going to do here? Bishop, all right. King G2. Knight goes to D4. Magnus not biting, setting up a basically perfect defensive blockade. Isolated pawn is very well protected. These rooks aren't, you know, obviously not making the biggest impression. C4, okay, Hikaru finally goes for it, but now the isolated pawn is gone. So now the entire target of black's position is gone, and Magnus trades everything down. Now the position is still a little bit, you know, playable. For example, queen to D5 is a fork. It wins either a bishop or a pawn, so black still does have to be a little bit careful, which is why queen E7 is played here. And the point of queen E7 is that this move now no longer, right, is attacking this, but actually this is losing. Now, it's losing for a pretty wicked reason. It's actually a pretty crazy reason. In this completely equal position, right, where you only have a couple of pieces left, white is actually almost winning if he takes the bishop. Obviously, Magnus saw that. He just thought this was equal. Well, position is winning for white if you play queen D4, which is really, really brilliant. The point is kind of simple. You're attacking the queen. If queen takes, pawn takes, the existence of a pass pawn, just the mere existence of this pawn is winning for white. Not because you're going to go run it, but because after king F3, king E6, king E3, you can't get in here. That's not going to work. But the point is, white is winning because white just pushes. Like, black is down a pawn, effectively. Because you have doubled F pawns. So, you know, in the long run, what would happen, something here is black would play B6, white would play like A3, black would play F6, white would play F4, and black would run out of moves. Black would play b5. You would play a4. And, you know, black at some point just literally runs out of moves. You get like this, check, and you get in, you take, you win. So this is winning because if you don't take the queen, you win a pawn. And in the long run, you are just playing a queen endgame up a pawn and almost 1.5 because these pawns don't feel like an extra, you know, an equal amount of pawns. So knight e5, queen d4. Now, the crazy thing is if roles were reversed, I feel like this is Magnus's like bread and butter. You know, Magnus here played queen e7, and I bet he kind of sat there and was like, wait a minute, can he take and play queen d4? Now, Hikaru also sensed it. He spent 40 seconds here, but ultimately he chose the wrong move. I mean, it's kind of counterintuitive that the way to win a game in a must-win situation is to trade all the pieces. But he goes back. He's not going to get another chance. Magnus re-centralizes his pieces, and now you are not going to get that exact moment. The game is going to go on, and, you know, he will put some pressure, but ultimately, not much can be done here. And they shuffle, they shuffle, they shuffle. And I don't actually remember how long this went on, but I actually think this position, so the game ended here because the position repeated on the 39th move, on the 41st move, and then on the 61st move. So we had 3 position repetition, 20 moves apart, which is a rule in chess. It's kind of interesting. Which means now Hikaru has to win at least one of these games to force a tiebreak. Now this next game is kind of hilarious because Magnus plays e4. Hikaru goes for the win. Sicilian defense. We got to play imbalanced chess. He plays the accelerated dragon, hyper-accelerated dragon. Magnus goes d4, takes, bishop g7. And now, you know, white can play knight c3 and bishop e3. And by the way, on Chessly, my educational platform, I have a great course on the dragon. If you're a beginner or intermediate player and you're looking for a Sicilian that is very easy to play with very clear plans, the dragon is a great, great, great opening. But I digress. Magnus plays one of the most annoying setups, which is c4. And now something hilarious happens. Hikaru goes knight c6, attacking the knight. Bishop e3. Queen goes to b6. Magnus goes knight b3, attacking the queen. The queen goes back. Magnus goes knight d4. Hikaru goes queen b6. Magnus goes knight b3. Queen d8. Knight d4. Game 3 ends in a draw. That was the game. That was the entire game. What? So the score is now 2-1, Magnus, who gives Hikaru another game with the white pieces. Magnus could have burned all the bridges. I mean, he could have just went all in this game, tried to win, but he was like, nope, I'm good. It's one less game I have to play. We'll speed things up. Maybe have a lunch appointment. It's actually Hikaru who's going to have to beat me on demand. Okay. Here we go. Hikaru has to go all out and win this game to force a tiebreak. Or he loses and he gets second place in this first event, the Chessable Masters, and Magnus qualifies to the Esports World Cup Final, the first player to qualify for the Esports Cup Final, World Cup Final in Riyadh later this year. B3, just like last time, only this time a slightly different approach chosen by Magnus, who you may recall chose this approach. This time, this knight is out, but not this pawn. Hikaru takes on f6. Taking on f6 is a move that you play when you absolutely need to play for a win. Now white plays c4 and tries to clamp on that square. Magnus immediately plays d5. That is the best move. Like this, and now like this. And basically, black is arguing here, well, you kick my queen around. However, you have no more central pawn control. Like, you don't have easy control. I'm going to put my bishop here. I'm going to be very, very happy you gave me a dark square bishop. Bishop d7 is not a move I understand basically at all. But I think it's just in general anti-pin, like knight e4, for example. Okay. Bishop b5. Rook c8. He's just trying to develop his queen side. Hikaru backs up. And this game gets really weird really fast. Hikaru puts his knight in the center and targets the pawn on c5. This is just a pawn ready to be captured. Okay. Bishop f5 pins the knight to the queen, so now you can't take, right? That was the entire idea. D3, just very solid. And again, a very cagey play from Hikaru, he's kind of playing here with a lack of space. He doesn't have any pieces kind of in the middle over there. Magnus has a slightly better position because Hikaru's playing deliberately provocatively. Hikaru's playing in a way where he's giving black the advantage by the traditional standards, but remember that black doesn't have to win the game. So it's kind of one of these, cat and mouse things where it is white who's ultimately going to have to beat black. If black is better, but black is just going to sit there, maybe the position will actually just play itself in many ways. Like rerouting, whatever. Computer is, not thrilled about it. I apologize. I set an alarm because I have to do something in 5 minutes. So I guess we have to wrap up this video, and then I have to go run my errand. Knight c4. Now, visually, the position looks completely reasonable, but actually here, Magnus needed to play queen a7, which would have kept an eye on the center. Instead, he goes here, and suddenly, Hikaru gets to play d4, and not just d4. Watch this. He jumps in with the knight. Oh my. Oh my. The comeback is upon us. That's pretty crazy. Magnus kind of fell asleep there for a moment. Now the rook is hanging, and it's a discovered attack on the queen. He's going to lose material. Magnus has to grab the knight and then grab the rook. Queen takes d4. Funny thing is, and very counterintuitive, pawn takes d4 is the better move. Splitting your pawn structure, okay, giving up control of certain squares, and keeping your queen back here, but yet pawn takes d4 is apparently the better move in the long run, because the queen here is a little bit exposed and immediately gets attacked. And Magnus here locks the queen away and says, okay, Hikaru, you have an extra queen, but this is the Esports World Cup. You only have 3 minutes and 45 seconds for the rest of the game. That's all the players get. In traditional chess formats, they have bonus time. They have 10 minutes and 2-second bonus. Here, this is it. You have 3 minutes and 45 seconds to prove your advantage. Hikaru is better, but black is quick with the counterplay and has a defensive fortress. He's playing against the queen. All right? Bull in a, what is it? China shop? I like when you buy like the plates and stuff. All right, the queen's gonna have to beat up some pieces. Rook c8. G3, Hikaru just making improvements. But rook a5 attacking the queen. King g7. Magnus doesn't have to do anything. He just sits and waits. Hikaru plays knight back to d2, but now suddenly black is better again. Too passive. Black's position a little bit too aggressive for white to deal with, and Magnus just, he's down a queen. I don't know how he's able to put this much pressure down a freaking queen, but he's down a queen, and he's still the one asking the questions. By the way, Hikaru has lost his queenside pawn. This is amazing. Like, this is, again, there's obviously a lot of pressure on white to win this game, but it shows you how 5 pieces can stand up to a queen. I mean, white has an extra queen. But because black's position is so well insulated, nothing in black's position is unprotected. Everything protects everything else. Yeah, his position is able to withstand a lot of pressure, and Hikaru trades the pieces down, but he literally cannot bring his queen out into the game. The queen is completely stuck, so he plays f4, bishop c4, very well timed. Hikaru now dips right next to 2 minutes. e4, again shutting the door. And rook a2 was not even necessary. I think you could have even just advanced this pawn, but Magnus didn't like how passive his rook was on a5. Hikaru plays f5. Look at this. The guy who is down a queen is still calling the shots. It's like a little dude in a jiu-jitsu match, Still submitting the bigger guy. Queen e5 check. By the way, you can win this knight, but if you win this knight, it's mate in 3. Unbelievable. Queen c7, king h6, and now, either out of pure excitement to finish the match, or just actually thinking he shouldn't play this move, Magnus repeats the position, makes a draw. Hikaru, by the way, Hikaru couldn't do anything else. Hikaru is on the verge of getting mated. He could have maybe played bishop h3 just to avoid any of that, but black is already better, and he ends the match by just repeating moves, and it's a draw. But what's funny here, if Magnus declined the repetition, he's playing for a win. He's still better, even if this is not a mate. Well, I guess it is, but bishop f7, and black actually plays for a win. Black will play b4, b3, b2, b1. Like, it's kind of nuts. So Magnus doesn't lose a single game. I think in the final run, he was completely undefeated, actually, I think, against Hikaru. He managed not to lose a single game in 8 games. And I think in the last 10 finals that they've played against each other, Magnus is 8-2. I believe that was a stat that I saw online. So, you know, it was very tense and back and forth. Like in the Speed Chess Championship finals, they've played very back and forth. But man, I mean, Magnus was really on his game. And so he qualifies for the Esports World Cup final. That will be July, August. So he doesn't even have to play the next event, but he probably will. Hikaru is in second place. They have a leaderboard for the two events. So Hikaru's in second, very close to qualifying. Then it's Jan Nepomniachtchi, etc. You can find the standings online, or I can read it to you before we go. Let's take a look at the leaderboard. It is Magnus, Hikaru, Jan Krzysztof Duda, Alireza Firouzja, Arjun Erigaisi, Andrei Yasipenko, Yu Yengi, Fabiano Caruana, Vladislav Artemiev, Wei Yi, and Anish Giri. But it is very, very, very close. And there will be more stuff decided in the event in May. But for now, it's almost fitting. Magnus Carlsen, first one to qualify for the 2025 Chess Esports World Cup final. Shout out to Team Liquid. Shout out to the Falcon. Shout out to every org that has signed a player. I will cover this throughout the season. That's all. Check out tickets for the tour. Check out Chessly. 4-night Sicilian course should drop today or tomorrow on Chessly. And then a few more to round out the month. Get out of here.